This week, Parshas Beshalach is also Shabbos Shira. Last year we spoke about the part that Shabbos Shira, we lay in as Yasher, these different minhagim, how the kriya, when you sing the song, the Shira, the Geder of Shira. There's a minhag by Klal Yisrael on Shabbos Shira to put out bread, challah, crumbs for the birds. Shabbos Shira, you put out. There are three reasons for the minhag brought in the Achronim and the Poskim. One reason, to remember when we went through the Yam and we said Shira, while going through the Yam, the birds also said Shira. So we want to remember the Shira for ourselves, that we said Shira, the matzav of the Shira, the birds were also saying Shira. To remember the Gavaldige matzav of the Shira, that the birds also said Shira, that's one reason. Another reason why, that's a reason why we give the birds, when they said Shira, so we want to remember the Shira, so we feed the birds. Another reason brought in the Nemuki Arachayim, and he says to remember a different ness. This week's parsha, besides it being Shabbos Shira, as Yashua and Klal Yisrael went through the Yam, it's also Parshas Hamon. The parsha speaks about the Mon. Moshe Rabbeinu told Klal Yisrael on Erev Shabbos to take Lechem Mishnah fell, and you should take a double portion. That's why we have the minig, the din of Lechem Mishnah. Take Erev Shabbos a double portion of the Mon, because Shabbos no Mon is going to fall. That's what he told Klal Yisrael. Dasim Vaviram wanted to be Ma'arir on Moshe Rabbeinu, that it's not true that Mon falls on Shabbos also. So what did they do? They went Friday night and they spread out Mon all over. So like this, when Klal Yisrael wakes up in the morning, Shabbos morning, they'll see Mon. So you see, it's not like Moshe, the Mon fell on Shabbos also. What happened? The nest happened, the birds came in the middle of the night and they ate up all the Mon that the Dasim Aviram spread out. So to remember that nest, we put out crumbs, challah for the birds, to thank them. We'll see soon different parts of it, but Al Kapanim, to remember that nest, that the birds came and ate up the Mon. So there was no Ira, Moshe Rabbeinu. Samuel, that's a second reason why we put out crumbs, challah for the birds. First reason is to remember the Shira Layam. Second reason for the Mon. A third reason, and this is brought in the Yismach Yisrael, the Alexander Rebbe, and he says, based off a Rashi in this week's Parsha, says, a behema thinks the only way he has food is because his boss gives him food. In other words, he doesn't feel that he could survive just because he gets food. He understands he's an eved to his rabbi, to his boss, and this behema, that's how he gets food. As opposed to a bird just flies around all over and he finds food. She finds food. A bird gets food without any belonging to somebody. This week's parsha, Rashi says, Kachs and Senas Amon, to put away L'doiris, to put away the Mon. And Rashi explains, during the Doiris, a person's going to say, I have to work, I can't learn Torah, because how am I going to be misparnas myself? I need to work to be able to have food. So we have the Tzinsenas Amon. The Mon shows, look in the Midbar. The Eibishter has ways how the food comes. You don't have to be meshubah to work to get the food. That's what the Tzinsenas Amon is, that a person can learn and doesn't have to worry. The Eibishter is going to take care. So that's another reason for the minig by Klal Yisrael to put out bread for the birds, for this concept to show that a person should know that the parnassus from the Eibishter, you're not meshubah to different things. The Eibush is Zanu Mafarnas. So we have three reasons for the minig to put out food, bread, crumbs, challah for the birds on Shabbos Shira. The shaila is, the minig is to put it out on Shabbos. The Shulchan Aruch says one is not allowed to feed an animal that doesn't belong to you. Lashon Shulchan Aruch Shin Chaf Daled Ein Noisnem Mayim V'Loi Mezoynes L'Fnei Devorim. You're not allowed to put food, and the Mishnah Berurah explains the Poskim why you're not allowed to feed an animal on Shabbos, an animal that's not yours, because he's a tircha. It's a tircha to feed an animal. Your own animal not only you're allowed to, but you're mechuyev, and these halacha, you're not allowed to eat till you feed your animals. But an animal that's not your animal, you're not allowed to feed on Shabbos, it's a tircha. So the shaila is, l'chayra, how could we put out bread, challah, for the birds on Shabbos Shira? L'chayra, these are tircha. You're not allowed to feed an animal that's not yours. The birds are not yours. Good. If a person has birds and he feeds those birds, okay. But if you put it out the window and you're feeding birds that don't belong to you, l'chayra, it should not be allowed. It should be asa. These are tircha. The Magen Avram brings the midig and he says not to do it. The Yavitz says, Lashon HaYavitz, Mashenoya Gimlitin Chitim, to put wheat l'fnei ha'oifes shtusu v'aser. L'maisa, the minig by Klal Yisrael is yetu. I wouldn't stop right here, especially many of you, your kids are going to come home with projects to put out taka to feed the birds. Before being miyashiv, these many different terutzim, a lot, if not most, if not all, put it out Erev Shabbos. So if you put it out Erev Shabbos, obviously you avoided the problem, because the whole issue is to put it on Shabbos. Is a tircha, you put it out Erev Shabbos. But on Shabbos, the violet could be problematic, because Lamaisa is a tircha and it's aser. So these many yeshuvim, yes, to put it out on Shabbos. One teretz says the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan says the Isser Tircha is only when you're being matriach for the birds, for them, for the animals. In other words, you take food and you prepare food and you put it out for the animals, that's a Tircha, and that's what's Aser. But if you're doing it for yourself, which we'll see right here, the examples, that's mutter. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. Why are we doing it for ourselves? We're doing it for ourselves to remember that the birds said Shira, and for Hakaras HaToiv to the birds that said Shira, to remember the Maimid of the Shira. We're doing it for ourselves. So even though it's Tircha, I don't think he's saying that it's not Tircha. It's Tircha, whatever Tircha there is to put it out, if there's Tircha, but the Tircha is not to feed the birds, but rather the Tircha is for ourselves. Memela it's mutter. The Lashon We're not being with tareich for the birds, ela b'shvilenu. We're being tareich for ourselves to feed the margel of fia moin sha'oifas ar layam. So we have anu machzikim toiva, and besides that, we're makah toiv to the birds. We also want to remember the maimid of kriyas yamsef that we said shira. So mainly, even though it's tircha, it's mutter because it's a tircha for ourselves. The same concept we mentioned before, the Yismach Yisrael, the limud, why we have it, he says, is to remember that all the parnasa, everything's from the Eibishter. We shouldn't get too carried away. So that's also a limud. He says the same concept like the Aruch HaShulchan, that even though it's tircha, but it's not tircha for the birds, but it's rather tircha for oneself. These are limud for ourselves. Machavrusa was ma'or nicely before, and it's interesting, l'chayra, one could wonder how far this gets stretched, that if the tircha is not for the animals, it's for yourself, it's mutter. If a person has an enjoyment to feed the birds, to feed the animals, so it's a tircha, but you're doing it for your own self, you want to feed the animals because you want to feed the birds, you want to see the different types of birds, is that mutter? So when is it aser? Only if you're feeding it, l'shem feeding it. So go to Arataka. How weit do you stretch this when it's l'tzayra chatzmai? But says the Aruch HaShulchan, the reason to be matter, to be matzdik, the minig by Klal Yisrael, he says, is because it's a tircha for oneself. The Makor Chaim, the Chavas Yor, says a different teretz, and he says that it's not called tircha. Why? Because the tircha, the pshat is that when you do it to feed them, here you're getting rid of it. So mal if you put it in the garbage, mal if you put it out the window for them, not the pshat is his tircha. There is no tircha. You anyways have to dispose what's laying on the table. So instead of putting it, you're cleaning up to put it in the garbage, you put it in the fridge, you put it outside the window to the birds. That's not called tircha. First teretz is tircha, but it's mutter. This teretz is that it's taka not tircha. You're anyways doing it. So instead of putting it in the garbage, putting it in the fridge, you put it out the window, it's not a tircha. Third teretz, what'd you say? Very good. What you're bringing about tashchas, we'll get to it. That's the part 2 in the shir. that we'll see, could be it's even a shaila if you're allowed to feed food that's for you and you're feeding the birds. We'll get to that soon. The Tosfos Shabbos says a third teretz to be meyashiv, the minhag of putting on Shabbos, and he says that we do it to feed the birds, to remember the minhag. He says that's a mitzvah. Either doing the minhag is the mitzvah, or to be hakaras hatoif to the birds is the mitzvah. Al kapanim, giving the birds to eat for this reason of the Shira is a mitzvah. Since the reason it's for mitzvah, it's a hakaras hatoif, and memela als mitzvah it's mutter. Now you can't be a over and isser, but the whole vart is it's a derabanan of tircha. So it's begeder like the maka mitzvah, like God's berabanan to aser a tircha.
The reason that he give it us, that they ate up that's not for yourself, that's to feed the birds. The feed this time I'm saying the reason.
But Aruch HaShulchan also, we're feeding the birds, but we're doing it for ourselves.
Right, for that reason we bring it down because they said Shira.
Yeah.
But here you're talking about the second reason that they ate up the
But that's Aviran, yeah.
I don't know if you do it for yourself, it's more they're giving them.
Aha. Interesting. The second reason that we mentioned, the reason why we give is to. So that's also al takaras hatoy for the birds, or he's saying if it's to remember the nest, we're doing it for ourselves. Even if it's akaras hatoy, the Aruch HaShulchan also says, and he still calls it a tircha la'atzmai. The lashon Aruch HaShulchan, he says that you're doing it for yourself. Ela b'shvileinu v'lochein onu machzikim lahem toiva. So it could be it's also machzikim toiva for the reason, the second reason, dasim aviram also. Yeah, interesting. So the third reason is that we're doing it's tircha, and maybe even we're doing it for the birds. It's a full tircha, but it's a tircha shal mitzvah, so therefore we're allowed to feed the birds on Shabbos. Third teretz. He brings B'chahai Gavna, the El Yerabba brings from the Madana Yom Tov on Simchas Torah. There used to be a minhag that kids used to go around with baskets and they used to spread out, throw the apples, spread out the apples all over, and the kids used to collect the apples. Now we have it with candies, maybe not with a basket, but the shaila is it's uvda the choil to go around with a basket to be ma'asif to collect all the apples. So why is it mutter to do? It's taka a cotton, but what's the heter? So the El Yerabba says that the reason why is because it's an Indian of simcha, makes simcha by simchas Torah. So Mamela it's begeder, the heter is a heter because it's b'maka mitzvah. So this uvda the choil is mutter on simchas Torah because it's b'maka mitzvah. We can't decide on our own, but al kapanim that was a minhag then by simchas Torah. And Mamela the minhag on Shabbos Shira to feed the birds, even though it's aser, it's tircha, but b'maka mitzvah it's mutter. Another teretz is mavur in the Muki Arachayim. And he says, just like it's mutter to feed, even though you're not allowed to feed animals, but a dog you're allowed to feed. And the reason for that is because mezoynei sehem muatim, they have very minimal food. So even though it's a tircha and it's not your dog, you're still allowed to feed it because they don't have enough food. You have to give them food. The Meili says like this. In a lot of places, most places, Shabbos Shira b'shalach falls out in the winter. And since it falls out in the winter, it's frozen, it's snowy, it's icy. So even birds also are very limited. They really don't have food. They need your help. So maybe it's mutter to put out. It's mutter to put out the food, which really comes out. It's not dafka heta for Shabbos Shira. Two of the terutzim we said before. The first teretz, the Aruch HaShulchan, is we're doing it for ourselves for the Shira, or we're doing it out mitzvah. That's dafka this week. This teretz is really and the second teretz you said is that it's not a tirchas. Of course, you could always do it. But this fourth teretz is the reason you're allowed to do it, even though it's tirchas, because in the winter you're allowed to do it.
So Florida,
right? And
in Florida you can do it.
Yeah. In Australia also, you're right, over there that they have, you also have to know now that it's different, that there's so much garbage outside and the birds could find, but the concept, that's how he says he's matzdik to do it because they're very limited on food. It's interesting to know the Chazon Ish in Arachayim, he's not speaking about the minhag of Shabbos Shir, but the Chazon Ish stretches it even a little further, and he says not only if there isn't food, but if there isn't a particular food. So this maybe is a heta even in Florida as well. The Chazon Ish says, he learns it in the Iran, that if there's certain food that the birds don't have, or any animals that don't have, you're allowed to give it. It's not dafka that they don't have food b'chlal, which means if the birds fly around and they can find challah, but they can't find cookies, let's say, and that's something of food to give them, so the Chazon Ish learns the Ram that it's mutter. Though he says, even though the Rambam learns not like that, you're not allowed to, but he says, somebody that's seimach on the Ram to feed animals which that particular food is not available, lo hefsid. So this is another teretz that the reason why you're allowed to do it is because nothing to do with Shabbos Shira. Avad, we do it for the minig of Shabbos Shira to remember the different reasons, but it's a heter anytime b'makom with either in a cold climate, so they attack very limited on food, or if they have plenty of food but don't have this particular food, it's mutter. Another teretz, the Eshel Avram says that it's mutter al yidei cotton. So even if you don't have all the other terutzim before, the person forgot to put it out, he could, he's a heter of a cotton to put it out. Now, we don't tell a cotton to go do Yisurim, but I guess b'chai gavana that it's a minig and it's only Issa D'Rabbanan, a cotton. Then he says another teretz also. This is actually, the first teretz was in Kuf Samach Zayin, the second teretz he says in Hilchas Shabbos, and he says, if you were going to put it there anyways, earlier we said that once you're moving it from your table, so then what's the difference where you're putting it? Here he says, if you're anyways going to put it, which means you shake out your tablecloth and you shake it out on the porch, so maybe if you shake it out and you're shaking it on the porch and the birds come, b'chai gavin it's mutter. If you put it even without to feed the birds, just you're putting it because that's where the place you dispose it, it's mutter. And Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasei brings that it's mutter to empty. You want to shake out your tablecloth and you want to shake it out in your backyard on the grass. Any Shabbos, it's mutter because you're anyways doing it. You're not doing it to feed the birds. If you're not doing it to feed the birds, it's mutter. Another yishuv. This one is for sure a new one. So even I said it a few years ago. There's still a few things. This is for sure a new teretz, even for the olam that was here and remembers it. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says a teretz like this, the following, and he says, the Gemara says in Bab Basra, Daf Ches Amud Aleph, one of the Amoraim said, "Parnaseini ki kelev ka'oirif." You mafarnas me like the Eibush, like you mafarnas a dog, and like you mafarnas a oirif. A oirif. What's the English type of a oiriv? Like yeah. That ka'oiriv, and Rashi explains, kelev is mezainas mo'atin, and a oiriv, also, they have, their Rashi says is because they're achzorious on their kids, and they don't give some the Eibush to made that, toich what their meiraglaim, toich what comes out, these worms, and the kids could eat. But al kapanim, that's parnaseni kekelev ka'oiriv. So he says like this, the following: since an oiriv has very limited food, at least their kids, these limited food, so memela for that, just like you're allowed to be mefarnish a kelev, you're allowed to be mefarnish oiriv. We said before all birds, because in general these limited food. He says dafka the oiriv has limited food, and since when you put out food, oirvim come. The Aruch HaShulchan says this teretz also. In Shin Chaf Daled, in other words, it's not a heter fit because stam you're feeding the birds. When you put out for the birds, Irvim also come, and for Irvim you're allowed because they don't have food, just like the Caliph doesn't have food. The Mela it's mutter. So this is again a teretz, not Afghan Shabbos Shira. It's mutter to put it out always, because when you put it out, not only regular birds come, Irvim also come. Ubechahai Gavna, it's mutter, even though feeding is a tirch, it's mutter.
I don't know why is the Erev different than any other bird at this point? When they're young and the parents don't want to feed them, that makes it heter to feed Erevim.
Yeah.
Erev is not any different when they're bigger. They're the same achzarius and they shouldn't.
No, it's not. It's not a. It's not for the Erevim for the parents. It's for the kids to come and eat because they're very limited on food.
But
so
the kids are the parents also at that point. By that time, they're the same. They're the same achzarius as the parents. It's only when they're in the nest and they don't have what to eat. There's no heter to just feed any birds.
I hear what you're asking. The time that the Erevim, the kids, they could fly around, so they could find food like any bird could find.
Yeah.
Here, once they're flying around, they're not different than any other bird, which means they could pick up food anywhere. So what does it help that the kids don't get from the parents? They'll find themselves. And for the parents that they're going around, what are they getting food? If they're getting for the kids, then they're like any bird. I hear.
You see ravens feed though, they are amongst each other, they fight. Maybe it's the other birds, they eat nicely together, they're always eating.
Running.
So maybe it's hard for them also.
So here we said many different yeshuvim. I think 8 yeshuvim. I think 7 or 8 yeshuvim to be able to for the minig to feed birds on Shabbos. However, like we mentioned in the beginning, a lot, if not all, Lamaisa put it out Erev Shabbos. But if somebody forgets to put it out Erev Shabbos, it should be pretty clear that it's from between all the different Ethereum, you can put it out on Shabbos. It's interesting, the Stipler Me'idach didn't put it out on Shabbos, but rather put it out Matzah Shabbos. That's what they bring. The Stipler put it out Matzah Shabbos, and the Stipler putting it out that he put it out Matzah Shabbos, he said still till after Malav Malka, it's still part of Shabbos. So Mela it's still Shabbos Shira, he put it out Gar Matzah Shabbos. There's one more point to cover over here. So we spoke about the minig of putting it out. There may be a question, how could you put it out on Shabbos? Many yeshuvim, we said that even though putting it out on Shabbos, some put it out before Shabbos. The Gemara says, Kasavar Avuna, Michael Adam, food that's designated for a person, ein machil lebehema. You can't feed food that is made for a person, you can't feed it to an animal. That's a Gemara, it's a Gemara, tiny stuff, Chafam at Beis. Rashi says 2 reasons. One reason is, it looks like you're being boyet in that Tava of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Eibush is giving you, Zanum or Farnis is giving you food and you're just passing it on to the animals. Inami, says Rashi, another reason that it's Bal Tashchas. Rashi. First of all, it's Mishum busy oichlen, like his boy it's been toivin HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Inami, says Rashi, Mishum the chasa Torah L'mayim Shal Yisrael. L'maisa, it's a shtickle like Baltashchas. What you mentioned before, it's Baltashchas. The other way, it's Baltashchas. It's good food that you're putting out. This Gemara is not brought in Shulchan Aruch, but the Magen Avram brings it. The Magen Avram brings it in Siman Kofai and Aleph. He says, in the Gemara Tainis, Michael Adam Yinal Michael Behema, because of busy oichel, it's not brought Allah and Shulchan Aruch. So the shaila is, how could we put out food, challah, for the birds? L'chayra, we should have this issue of Michael Adam Eimachil Behema. So I think it's important to note that if you put out crumbs that you're anyways not going to eat, and it's anyways going to the garbage, so that's not what we're talking about. You being boyed by Tavad HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not eating it anyways. But how could if one wants to put out not just crumbs, you put out papir before Shabbos, you take a few slices of bread, you take a bulkel or challah and you put it out, it should be problematic feeding the animals with good food. So Lamaisa, the Poskim, the Chassam Sofer and others say that we don't paskin like that. We don't paskin like that Gemara. The Lashon, the Gemara says Kasavar Avuna. Kasavar Avuna, says the Chassam Sofer, Lamaisa, we don't paskin. It's not brought in Shulchan Aruch. Since we don't paskin, it's mutter. Others also say like that. They bring rayas from 2 different Gemaras. The Yaivis brings from a Mishnah. It's Nagoyis v'Chadushim only in some of the Gemaras. On the Gemara Tainis, the Mishnah in Meisters, the Mishnah says, in other words, food that for you're allowed to give to the behema. So you see, you're allowed to.
Does it mean special food for them, like naked food?
It's talking about food for carrot, that what your food that you want to have, but lagabi maestris, if it's a dain lo yagi lo inas maestris, aray is mutter. Mele giving to behema is like aray, so it's mutter. So mele that's a tzad leheter. I'm sorry, that's how it means. Even though the Gemara says you're not allowed, or we don't paskin like that. The Chassam Sofer also says v'chein amma devar, that there is no isser. There's another ride from a Gemara. The Gemara speaks about achana if a person is meichen before Yom Tif. So if a person's meichel achana for a person is not achana for klavim, which you see food that would be'etzem be for a person. You could be meichen lekalav. You could give it to kalav. It happens to just be that when you make achana, it's not considered achana leklavim. These are different teretz. The teretz of the Pardes Yosef says. And he's miyashav like this. He learns in a pasuk. V'yisram toichal chayis asada. And he learns the following. He says, what's v'yisram toichal chayis asada? Even though it's aser to give food, but a food that is left over, which means you're anyways not going to eat it. If you're going to keep it, it's going to become spoiled. What's the yisram teichel chayis asad, which means the food that you're eating, that's food to take off your plate to give to behemi, you're taka not allowed to. But food that's anyways not going to be eaten, just like a small example, let's say the chant, Shabbos, you finished. It's good, it's meichel adam, but you're not eating it anymore. And then if it's going to stay, it's going to get spoiled if there's no fridge. So bread, challah, the same thing also. If you're going to, what you're eating, you're going to eat. But let's say after the suda, those 2-3 pieces that you cut already, that's going to get dried out, and you're not eating it, that's mutter. So mamela like this. Lagabe, putting it on Shabbos, you saw many yeshuvim. Lagabe, feeding an animal. Lagabe, giving food, Michael Adam lebehema. So first of all, we saw the Pasha says it's not lahalacha, even though the Magen Avram brings it. Or we saw that bread that's anyways not going to be eaten, even though it's good bread now, but you're not going to eat it, and it's going to get ruined eventually, that's also mutter. Have a wonderful Shabbos.